Wow. On that note, all right, brothers, we are again here for the webinar session for the Grand Lodge of Minnesota. Let me bring up my little handy dandy PowerPoint that I use. So again, welcome again to the next session of the webinar series. Again, as we've talked about before, this is not a tiled meeting. As you heard, I announced we did start the recording here a few moments ago. Please keep yourself on mute during the presentation. Any questions, please send them via the chat and we'll get them covered at the end. Speaking of the end, around about 5 minutes or so before the end of the session, I will be putting up a poll. Please be sure to submit your poll to submit the poll before you leave. It helps us kind of judge what kind of content we want to go after and add more content to this series. Oops, too fast. Upcoming webinar sessions. You know, these the first two are ready for registration. I'll be getting these other ones set up for registration here tomorrow. And you can always send your suggestions through the link, the webinar suggestion. It is also on the main webinar registration page. Now we will hand it over to Worship Brother Joe for the 6 steps of initiation. And give me a second, brother, and I will give you permission to share. There you go. It should be yours.
Thank you, Worship Brother Jason. So start off with welcome. I'm about to share my screen. And I want to thank everyone for taking the time this evening. I know that at least here in Minnesota, it's a beautiful evening here in the Twin Cities. And the temptation is to get outside and enjoy it. I know I was out with my kids just about an hour ago and I didn't really want to come back inside. And especially during a time when we're all dealing with the coronavirus lockdowns. I know that when you have nice weather, it's tempting to get out and do something in there. And let me make sure this is shared. All right, we got visual.
We do.
All right, perfect. First of all, my name's Joe, and I'm the chairman of the membership committee, and we've got Christopher Wendover and Lloyd Cheney also attending tonight. They're also on the membership committee. For this particular program, the 6 steps to initiation, it was a little bit nebulous when we first brought it out. So there's a lot of questions around what exactly does this cover. By tonight's session, what I hope to do is give you the overview of what this was intended to do, sort of what it is. It won't go into a great deal of depth, but I hope to at least leave you with the knowledge of what it is, what it does, and why we decided to adopt something like this. So here's my basic outline. I'm going to cover what it is, where we got it. It was meant to address a very specific need and problem. And as you'll see here in a few minutes when we start the discussion, there are lots of places where it doesn't apply. But it's designed to give lodges a bit more clarity in how they deal with a specific type of problem. Now, membership issues are varied, and it depends on where you are, the type of demographic that you deal with consistently. This is meant for a very particular type of problem. And then and we obtained this information from other Masonic jurisdictions. We're in the process of adapting that to our own craft here in the state of Minnesota. I do want to emphasize that the use of this is being a helpful guide in addressing that problem. It is not mandatory. And then we'll cover very briefly the steps, and then I'll open it up at the end for some questions. All right, so what are the 6 steps to initiation? This was a program that came to us by way of South Dakota and then Michigan. It's possible they got that from somewhere else, but that's the origin of where we got this. And it was designed to help lodges look at a specific problem. Basically, in our modern times, we're seeing more and more candidates come to us by way of the electronic means. They will fill out an application on a website, be a Mason is a good example of that. We're seeing more of these. This isn't the old days where the diction well recommended applies, because a lot of the members that we're seeing, we don't know anything about them. And one of the problems that we see from this is that in the process of bringing them in the door, teaching them about masonry, we see a lot of folks drop out after they've taken the entered apprentice degree, or they've progressed through a couple of the steps and then they decide it's not for them. This is intended to address that problem by enhancing the education that goes both ways. So it's intended to allow candidates to learn more about masonry. Maybe it's something that they're merely curious about, and they don't seem to grasp the implications of what a life in masonry entails. And it also helps the candidate get to know some of the brothers of the lodge. It also goes the other way, so that if it is someone who's simply trying to satisfy idle curiosity, we're not wasting our time by bringing them through the degrees, putting on a lot of outstanding ritual work when that was never really what they intended to do. This does not apply to the situation of where, again, we return to the old days where you've got a family member or someone that most of the lodge members know. The process that lodges use for conducting their investigations and learning about the brother that way would still apply. This is a focus that tends to be on the pre-petition portion of it. As the 6 steps are brought to fruition, they're designed to give as much information between the candidate or the potential candidate and the lodge as possible before the petition is ever handed out. So first of all, this is a guide. It is not meant to be a diction to do something. Different lodges may already have something in place. And as I mentioned before, this is meant to simply help educate the lodge and the brethren and the potential brother on each other. We're adapting this from the South Dakota guide. That should tell you that it's adaptable. And as we know, membership issues are different in South Dakota as they are in Colorado or Michigan. And even within the state of Minnesota, the membership tends to be different, so that you'll have different issues up on the range than you will in southwestern Minnesota. And even lodges that meet in the same building will have a different demographic. They do different things well, so they'll have specific issues to them about membership. The same is true for this guide. You adapt it as you need for your particular lodge. You may not see these types of issues and can govern yourselves accordingly, but Mr. Wendover especially is doing a fantastic job of applying this to the Masonic use as we see it here in Minnesota. So there are some hard materials that we can disseminate once we have those available. It comes with things like checklists, some suggested questions that you might want to ask, readings for the potential candidate to educate themselves on the craft. You can do some things like give out some Masonic history of the state of our particular jurisdiction or your lodge. There are lots of things that lodges can do with this particular program. All right, so let's get down to the steps. If I had to give an overview of what the 6 steps to initiation is, it's governing the touch points between lodges and the potential candidates. So the steps are arranged in terms of the meetings, essentially. So the step 1 would be that initial contact. In the business world, they call it setting the meeting. This is usually where the candidate, potential candidate, would reach out to a particular lodge. Sometimes they come to us at the Grand Lodge level through the wider websites like Be a Mason, in which case we try to put them in touch with someone at the lodge that can initiate the contact. But here's where you have the ability to learn a lot more about whether someone is just merely curious about the craft or if they're actually serious. Typically, this is someone who's in the geographic area, but it isn't always the case. So the step 1 is the first part of that contact. It's something that you could use to learn more about the candidate, ask questions. So there's some suggested questions that you might want to ask. This is where you start the education from our side to the potential candidate side. This is where you would also go and invite them to a meeting with a brother. So if you have a protocol in your lodge, someone that you want to take the lead and set up the initial contact, that would be perfect. This is a perfect time to do that. But the point of step one is to get as much information to the potential candidate as possible, and then also the other way around. Learn as much as you possibly can. But the step one is the initial contact, and then you're setting up the next step. Step two is the first meeting. Ideally, as far as the protocols that the program we received is, it would be a brother and a potential candidate in person, in a place that that they would both feel comfortable. As I mentioned, this is adaptable. One of the things that we're doing here in Minnesota is looking at combining a few of the steps. If you have the ability to, like say you've got a stated meeting. I know in the COVID world, we're restricting the ability to have stated meetings. So step two might be something where you could get together with a candidate on a one-to-one basis. But if we are able to have meetings, the dinner before a stated meeting would be a perfect opportunity, and then several of these steps would then be combined. But at this point, step two has a protocol for questions that you would want to have answered. And I have them reversed here, answers and questions, because this is where you ask the questions, how did you find out about Masonry? What do you know about us? And then this is where you start to ask the more difficult questions. I mean, do you understand that there is a financial obligation involved with becoming a Mason? Do you understand that we consider it a lifelong commitment? Those types of things are important to get across because, again, we're trying to weed out the ones who are just looking to satisfy curiosity more than anything else. We've got some handouts with some more questions. I won't go into those in too much depth, but one of the things we'd like to look at is how this applies. So the petition process, our Masonic handbook, especially pages 20 and 21, do a very good job of being able to address to the potential candidate some of the things they might want to take into account when they're about to begin this process. If you do have a stated meeting and you invite them to the dinner before the stated meeting, this is a perfect opportunity to get them together with other members of the lodge and give them a tour. Tell them a little bit about the history of the lodge. These are some of the things that are unique to you and gives the potential candidate an idea of whether this is a good fit for them. Under the rubric of the 6 steps, the third step is sort of going back to the second meeting. This is the second in-person meeting. This ideally would be at the candidate's home and ideally with the potential candidate's significant other present as well. One of the worst things that can happen is that we've got someone who's enthusiastic, serious about becoming a Mason, and then doesn't have any support whatsoever from the home front. That makes it very difficult. You don't want to put the craft in the situation of forcing someone to choose. So it's always ideal to be able to sit down with the significant other and be able to field any questions. At this point, the brother, it could be the same brother as the one who had initially met with the brother, or it could be another brother who's maybe a little bit more in the same situation. So they've got a significant other who's also been a Masonic wife, knows exactly what that entails. But the point here with this particular meeting is to help them understand what's at stake with the potential candidate joining. The fourth step is a third meeting. Now, this is where we here in Minnesota are trying to think of combining these into the separate steps. If you have them come to the stated meetings dinner, this would be taking place at the first or the second step. But this is, if you don't do that, and it may be a while before we can have larger meetings, this would preferably be other members of the lodge. So if it's the dinner before the stated meeting, this is the ideal place for that. If you can't do that, then this would be something, now we can still do golf outings here in Minnesota with social distancing, this would be a good opportunity to have a few other brothers come and let the potential candidate know more about sort of the character of the lodge, but it also goes the other way and then gives the potential candidate the ability to learn more about us. So it's, again, one of those things where this is something at this point, it's mostly a social meeting between the two. The potential candidate ought to, at this point, know a little bit about our history, a little bit about the particular history of your lodge, should know a little bit about the character, what you do. Do you do a lot of charitable events? Are you good with the ritual? Not necessarily giving them the ritual. You don't want to give the keys of the castle away, but you want to sort of emphasize what your lodge does to see if this is something that they're going to be able to contribute to. Fifth step would be a social meeting. This doesn't always happen, and this is going to be one of probably the hardest steps to actually pull off, because not every lodge has large social meetings, especially where significant others show up. You may do table lodges, or you may do pancake breakfasts or things like that. The idea here is to bring in the potential candidate with his significant other in order to see how we function in the social setting. So the step where you met with the brother at his home, that was sort of in his comfort zone. Now let him come and get acclimated to the way we interact with each other in a social setting. This would work also if you do a dinner before a stated meeting, but ideally at this point you would want the significant other if they have one, and if not, that's just fine too. And then finally, the sixth step is, here they've got this is listed as being the petition. This is wrapping up everything that you've taken, all of the different meetings, the touch points, making them aware of who you are, what we are as a craft, and then finally letting them know what the process is. A lot of times people have no idea what the initiation process is. You can tell them it's going to be read in lodge, it has to be voted on, we'll let you know. And then once that has taken place, you ideally want to let them know right away what the outcome was. And this particular part of the 6 steps has this is where the formal investigation and presentation takes place afterwards. But in an ideal world, during the voting process, every single person voting would know a little bit about the potential candidate. That doesn't always help, but the 6th step is designed to give as much information as possible to the lodge and to the candidate, so that there are fewer people that are dropping out. And then you want to let them know a little bit about the degree process. I want to emphasize here at this point that at least here in Minnesota, we've separated out the functions of the mentoring function and the membership function. It's a little bit of a disjointed situation from the membership standpoint, but at this point, once the degrees begin, that's where the mentoring takes place. This is the point where you bring them into the lodge. You want to make sure that you're getting as much information as possible. If they are going through a one-day class, for example, you want to let them know who's going to be there from your lodge to keep the touch point for familiarity. You want to make sure that they understand what's going on with the dues and things like that. They want to know what the dress code is for the meetings, things like that, who the officers are, what they do. In general, you don't want to, again, go through too much, but the emphasis here is on bringing in people who know who we are, so that they're able to commit to what we do. We're not looking for people who are just here to further their career or things like that. We want to make sure that people understand what Masonry is about, and so that they're able to make that decision in an informed manner. So it looks like I've got some chats coming in.
I can answer the first question, Joe.
Sure. Go
At
ahead.
least in the chat, and specifically, how long is this process? I mean, in all honesty, it really does depend on the lodge. Some lodges can get this done faster than others. You're kind of combining a lot of things here. Like when we say make sure they know about the officers and what they do, you're doing that on the tour. You're just giving them a little bit of information so they have a true understanding of what they're joining. You see some lodges will take, 6 months to do this process, and some can do it in 2 to 3. And some say they do it in 1 month. Some lodges will literally get a petition, vote on it, and get them into the next class. So, I mean, that's really the personality of the lodge, and whether or not what you're doing is actually working for you.
Yeah.
If the process is, if you feel it's going too fast and people aren't understanding, and your candidates are like, I'm not really sure what I'm joining, that's key to saying you're probably not ready to join. If they don't understand what they're joining, or if you ask them, in that, the investigation process, why are you joining Masonry? I mean, if they can't articulate that, then clearly you need to give them more information. And so it also depends on the person joining. Are they, a good friend of a brother? Are they a family member? And you're going to take different things into account, and we just don't know an exact timeline. We're kind of telling lodges, do what works best for your lodge and experiment.
Right, and I'll piggyback off of that. You may already have a process in your lodge where it works for you, and like we said, membership depends on the lodge. If you're seeing a trend in the number of people dropping from the entered apprentice degree to the fellowcraft, or to the master mason degree, chances are you're encountering something like this. If you're not, this is entirely not a problem that you should probably be dealing with. Move on to things that better fit what you're doing. But it is entirely dependent. Some lodges have very quick degree cycles. Some take a long time. Not everybody moves in the same speed, but that should be known to the potential candidate. What the process is. The layout of the lodge, not just in terms of who's doing what, but as it relates to them in their coming into the craft.
There's some lodges that actually tell the potential petitioner, hey, you need to attend X number of stated meetings prior to because we want to know who you are. There's several lodges that kind of take a more personal route in acquiring that candidate and making sure that they're aware that they're joining more of a lodge that considers it a family. Taking that extra time to understand somebody, and then or recommend, hey, the personality of our lodge may not be right for you. You may need to go check out another lodge. I mean, in all actuality, it's a couple of phone calls and a couple of in-person meetings, and it's kind of going to vary on the person's knowledge of what they're getting themselves into. If they're like, hey, I thought this would be a good idea, and I stumbled in off the street, that may take a few months, and so that guy knows what he's joining. But if it's a guy who's like, man, I've been wanting to do this for the last 10 years, my dad's a Mason, he has a more understanding of the lodge itself, and you're going to focus more on what are the commitments for your specific lodge. Is it okay for them to just attend every other meeting or whatnot, or are you asking more from your candidate? Each lodge has a different personality, but really it's the communicating that up front is so important that people know what they're getting themselves into. When brothers transfer, you see them when they go to get dual membership or transfer lodges, you see more it was a location thing. Let that candidate know, or potential petitioner, hey, is this the closest lodge to your house? Is this the closest lodge to your work? I mean, we're making Masons. We're not necessarily recruiting just for our lodge.
Yeah, and it also will depend really on the timing. We happen to be in a very unique situation where we're not able to meet in person much. But sometimes people will, I mean, some lodges go dark during the summer and there aren't any social activities really. So somebody who comes to someone in May, right before a lodge goes dark, there may be, a little bit more time involved in getting them the information, getting them to know the lodge. Some lodges don't go dark, and so they'll have a different timeline. So it really depends on a lot of different factors. One of the questions that came up in the chat was, what are some of the go, no-go criteria for the process? That's a good question because, I mean, you ask yourself as someone who's evaluating a potential candidate, we all know, we're not in this for personal gain. If it seems something that obvious, then it probably is. I've done, for my own lodge, I've done countless investigations. It's one of those things that you get a feel for after a while. But if it's something that's just something that can be addressed by education, explaining who we are. We're not here to promote our business. We're not the Rotary Club. We take our commitments seriously, not that the Rotary Club doesn't, but that's not the purpose of what we do. And they may be understanding of that, and then they can move on. As far as no-go things, like you'll be able to tell. I mean, that's something that if you have a question about, reach out to us on the membership committee, talk to the leadership of your lodge, and we're happy to help address that. Most of it is pretty cut and dry. What is or isn't.
So my question was more directed towards the content of the questions in that particular document you're referring to, because frankly, there's quite a bit of discriminatory power in whoever has that first encounter with that candidate, right? If you are not inclined to conduct these kind of interviews or these kind of introductions, subjectively, you might decline or you might talk a candidate out of an engagement that otherwise would have been very productive or helpful to the guy. Right. So I just want to get a little bit better understanding as to what that questionnaire entails and to what extent that whoever is conducting that initial encounter with that candidate, does that individual have the capacity to assess a candidate on its merit?
Yeah, that is a good question. That's something that is a concern because when the lodge makes itself available to candidates who have questions, you really want to have somebody who, and it doesn't have to always. Most of the time, it's a secretary of the lodge, but it doesn't have to be. Again, this situation is addressing that candidate that people aren't familiar with. So you want to have ideally someone who's comfortable asking questions, that can make them feel at home. That's something that could be addressed by the lodge leadership on, what kind of person do we want to have as the touch person for that first contact. And if it's someone who, I guess, how many candidates have you had in the last few years, and how many people have called asking for questions? That could be an indicator of someone's, talking people out of, going through the process. That may be an individual lodge issue rather than a membership issue, but some of the questions that are asked in the questionnaire are really, how did you learn? How did you learn about us? What do you know about Masonry? And just getting them to open up and talk. A lot of times when people say, my dad was a Mason, my uncle was a Mason. Okay, so what do you know about us? And then they have quite a bit of knowledge. But for people who haven't that personal connection, you may need to delve a little bit deeper at the outset and say, well, okay, what brings you to us? And get them to open up and talk that way. Keeping in mind that eventually a brother who's going to be meeting with them in person ought to be taking a little bit step further, letting them know, again, it's, what do you know about us? Did you know there's a financial obligation involved? Are you aware that we consider this to be a lifelong commitment? Things of that nature. So if there is a problem with the initial response, that can be addressed probably better with the lodge level.
You want to ask questions that are going to essentially satisfy you as a brother to make a proper decision when you vote, right? And it comes with education. It is the lodge's job to educate the brethren about Masonry so they can actually answer those questions. Generally, if somebody's reaching out through a website or a social media platform, it's pretty easy for the master to direct them to somebody who's a more knowledgeable brother. But if you're walking around with a square and compass, you might want to be able to explain a little bit what that square and compass means. And if you're finding out that brethren in their lodge cannot articulate what Masonry means to them, then I would say then we're kind of failing as a lodge and not educating those brothers. I mean, any brother should be able to field, a certain amount of questions regarding the lodge, a little bit of history of the lodge, a little history of Masonry, and the petition process, because essentially we are all a recruiter in some fashion. We are all representing the fraternity, and at any moment we can have an interaction with somebody, but because we personally can't answer their question or we're not able to articulate what Masonry is, well then that may already tell them I don't want to be a part of this. Their members don't even know what it is. So it's more of a guideline, and it's just basic questions. What type of person are you? How active are you in your community? Why do you want to be a Mason? And it's just elaborating on those questions as somebody's giving you a response. Is the best way I can describe it. And yes, I would agree. There should be some way of, teaching brothers how to talk to people in general. And that's something we don't really do very well.
So I see Lloyd, Brother Lloyd has a question or a statement. If you want to go ahead.
Thank you, worshipful brother. Yeah, I was just going to, I guess, piggyback on what worshipful brother Chris had to say. Exactly mirroring, I think you kind of nailed that. I did, 20 years in the Army. A lot of that was in recruiting command in the National Guard. Working on the officer side, recruiting medical officers as well as regular recruits. But so dealing with that, but kind of getting into Masonry. A lot of these things come through the Grand Secretary, and the Grand Secretary then sends these leads come through, and then you get a lead, and you get a name and a phone number, and you call and you follow up, and sometimes like it's been said that it's kind of easy that the person is the potential candidate is maybe their father or their grandfather was a Mason. They know exactly what they want to do, and they're kind of an easy fit. The lodge is local. I have a gentleman that lives in St. Paul. He's 23 years old. I just recently made contact, and I'm going to have to we're going to have to walk and talk through. He has a little bit of knowledge. I did a kind of a preliminary talk through. He understands a lot about fraternity and Masonry. He really likes the esoteric things and knowledge about Masonry. He all these other things about Masonry that he doesn't know a lot about Masonry, but he wants to know more. So we're going to have a kind of a sit down and talk a little bit more about it. So we're going to have a development of conversation. So, but getting back to being trained, I think that maybe our retention team or recruitment team, or not recruitment team, but our, I guess, membership team, I don't want to call it recruitment team because stay away from that kind of term, but membership team, maybe we could help out other other brethren on how to give points or pointers on how to maybe approach this technique for how to approach, potential candidates and to do this process. But I've never really had a problem interviewing people. It's not just kind of follow the process and build rapport and talk to people and find out kind of their wants, needs, and desires, figure out where they want to go, asking open-ended questions, probing, where they're why they really want to, what their interests are, first of all in masonry, and what makes them tick, and why they really wanted to figure out what turned them on to masonry in the first place. So I guess that's kind of where my little 2 cents of why I thought about adding to this, and I think where we really need to go with it. But that's all. So.
And also understand this was a general overview of these 6 steps. We've taken them and we've consolidated them down where we get into the nitty gritty of, what kind of specific questions are you looking for and asking for? What kind of information should a brother know or be prepared for in how to answer certain things? We have an interactive document that you can use as just like a minimal checklist. There's a traditional way that we took from South Dakota, which is very more of your, I wouldn't say your early 90s style, where you bring the guy into the lodge, you sit him down and stuff like that. You're not necessarily engaging over phone calls and internet and stuff like that. There are 2 types of processes that South Dakota had produced. And so we have that, and we're going to get into more of that. I mean, we have a couple more membership seminars we have to produce. And I know one in June in particular, we'll get into a lot of that nitty gritty of this program itself. But I mean, just the time that we had and was asked to deliver the content, we did the overview.
Thank you, Worship Brother. Worship Brother Nick, you said you had a comment. Would you please?
Yeah, I was going to say, great presentation, Worship Brother Amos and District Representative Chris Wendover. One thing I was going to say is that this is a great guideline to bring home to the lodge. But when it gets to the lodge, your membership committee should be working with your mentorship committee, should be working with your leadership and the rest of your lodge. This is the path to a Master Mason. This is the journey a man goes through. We want to make sure his experience is good and fulfilled, and we're asking the right questions, giving the right answers, and not only getting a significant other on board, but making her a supporter that says, get to lodge right now. But the whole point is that it needs to be put together so we can understand each step and make sure they're being taken care of. And that goes past the Master Mason degree to really make sure we keep checking in with them, that we have the plan. So wonderful guideline. Bring it back to your lodge and just try to incorporate it into some different questions. Thank you for taking my comment.
Thank you, Worship Brother.
Yep, and to follow up a little bit, so first of all, thanks for all the questions. If you have a chance to do the poll, and you feel like the sort of the education of brothers and how to respond to questions is a separate topic that you'd like to address, we'd be more than happy to see that. So use that as an opportunity to give us some constructive feedback on things you'd like to see. But then I guess, like I said, it's tricky because part of what we do is overlaps with the mentoring. I agree completely with, we're here to make Masons, and the education process continues on past the Master Mason degree. So we definitely know that that's something that should be addressed. I guess this is, like I said, it's something that we put together to address that very specific problem of where the potential candidates and the lodge don't really know a whole lot about each other. And we want to make sure that that's addressed.
I have one, excuse me, this is Bruce Reichel. I have one comment, if I can interject in the proper order. I don't know if other people are queued up.
Oh, go ahead, please.
I'm the Leo at Tussler Summit in Roseville, just to give you a background. I can't see everybody, for some reason, I can't see everybody who's on the list here tonight. I've only got 6 people in the corner. I've been trying to see the whole group, but it hasn't worked yet. Anyway, each lodge, as far as attracting candidates, we have all of the electronic areas out there to make people who are not Masons aware of our Masonic Lodge. But because of where we are, apparently, we have, most of our members recently have come as drive-bys or drive-ins. We're on County Road B2 in Roseville, and we're just east of Rosedale. So a lot of people come across there. We're also almost across the street from the high school, from Roseville Area High School. So there's traffic of all sorts, and we've had a lot of people, men just drive in and say, I'm interested in Masonry. But they've driven in on a Tuesday night because we're there every Tuesday night. I don't know. I think more lodges have social meeting when they aren't having a stated meeting, so that we are able to use every Tuesday, and only the first Tuesday is a stated meeting. But because we're there informally, we can bring in a new man. We have people there who are not necessarily super organized, but are super good at presenting the lodge to someone who has less than full knowledge of it. And that's real important. And maybe we should do some more organizing. I'm the Leo, and I'm thinking now in this organization, in this meeting, that I should maybe run a Leo on how to talk about the lodge if you find yourself in that position. People who aren't as good, and there will always be varying levels of who is good at talking to someone about becoming a Mason, better than others. There's no way you can make everybody equally as good, but we'd like to get them there and have things sort of organized. We only have one dinner. We do get them to the dinner. We're following this procedure and have for several years since we started meeting every Tuesday. So we have stated, and then everything else is a Tussler Tuesday. So it's worked out well for us. But I don't know if your building allows that. We're lucky we have a big parking lot in front of our building. Many lodge buildings were built in the trolley era. They don't have a parking lot. And our front is all well lit, especially when the sunset is early enough, because the dining area is in front. So it's very inviting. It's obviously open. It's not blackened on the front or a second story situation. We are a 1-story lodge. So, because we were built in, Cornerstone was late in 1978. So it's a different building from many of the more traditional 2-story lodge situations. But it's very good to have people who can do this. And we have been blessed with people who can lead them around. And then they get to meet everybody, because we are in groups doing separate things, but we can break off and talk to this new man. And it has worked very well for us. Whether or not everybody can do that is a totally different matter. But especially having people there every Tuesday, our meeting night, has made a big difference in the number of people we get. And it's simply because they drive up and get out of their car and say, hi, I kind of want to know about Masonry. Well, I'll end my spiel at that point and turn it back to the people running the show. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Bruce. You know, it's a great point. Sometimes people will just stop by, and it's good to have the more articulate among us be able to, I guess, fashion the pitch. We should all, I think, be able to explain why we personally joined Masonry. And for a lot of folks, that's a compelling message just on its own. But I think you're right. It depends a lot on the individual. And if that's something that we would like to explore further, I think we'd be happy to do something like that. So, but you're right. I think that's something that some people are gifted at, being able to explain a little bit better than others who we are and what we do. So it's a good point. Well taken.
So, and it's good because usually the people doing explaining are a little younger or a lot younger, and the closer to the age, usually, of the person walking in, having somebody talk to them who can relate to them better is the best situation. I mean, they come and say to me, and see what happens after 52 years, you know. So I get to say hi to them. So here's old Bruce, and you know, things, people do stay in this for a lifetime. So it's very nice, in having these other meetings has worked well for us. I mean, we'll be stuffing envelopes if that's needed. We'll be working on a presentation to go online. We do practicing for the next degree. We'll be working with the candidates on their prove up. We can handle all this in our lodge building on those other nights. And it started from a very small thing a few years ago to a real ritual of being there every Tuesday. And not everybody can be there every Tuesday, but if you're there 3, 2, 3, even 4 on a 5-week, 5-night month, great. And that camaraderie has really changed the lodge. I mean, we now get about 23 brothers in a meeting as an average number. And I think our lodge is only 150 nationwide. I remember a lot of our guys have retired and are snowbirds or live permanently in the South. So it really made a difference to have this extra meeting and doing Masonic education every stated. So that's all it took for us to turn around. We still do our various events to make money for the scholarships, et cetera, whatever your charitable issue is. And bringing that up to these people gives them a sense, of course, of what your lodge does. That we just don't have a pancake breakfast. Why do we have a pancake breakfast? And that's what the people who are taking them around the lodge are good at, better than others. But if we could teach everybody to get them started and pass them off to the guy who's really good when the time is right, it would be more helpful. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
I'd like to add a quick comment, Jason, if I permit. Over the last, well, I would say 5, almost 10 years that I'm doing education, I've seen a lot of candidates. And I don't know about you guys' experience, but what I've noticed is that of the, let's say, the 50 guys that over the years are coming in, 50, 60 guys are coming in over the years, half of it, halfway through the program, admit that they have found something that they were not looking for. Meaning that ultimately, what they found in Masonry was totally different than what motivated them to come into Masonry. Okay, so that's one observation.
Yeah.
And I think all of us have that experience, because on the outside, you only see a part, and you fall in love with whatever, the exoteric, the esoteric, or whatever it might be, right? The point being that extracting out of a candidate in that first encounter, which I applaud you guys. I think this is a great way to get good men and quality men into Masonry. So to tease that out, but there is a second one, and we haven't really talked about that, and that is really the investigation itself. I briefly touched on it, but I think it is a very important part that in many cases is underestimated. And the reason I'm saying this is that I've seen, unfortunately, brothers turned away that subsequently kind of readmitted themselves and turned out to be fantastic brothers, pioneers in the craft, supporters of the craft. And over the years, I've been thinking about, there's something fundamentally wrong in the process of how we are vetting out our candidates. And it's either by virtue of the questions we're asking or how we are interpreting the answers. And maybe that's obviously not the primary purpose of this particular presentation, but I do want to emphasize that that is somewhat of a broken chain, meaning that these brothers, they go out, they ask the questions from a set of 5 or whatever it is, work them through. And now these guys, not familiar with or in depth, having had an in-depth training in interpreting these questions or the answers, are now giving a report to the lodge as to whether this is a suitable brother or not. And that is something we really need to pay some attention to and work on, because a lot of good quality men are either lost or marginal men join the fraternity. Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you very much for that. I agree completely with the importance of the investigation, and I think this goes sort of hand in hand with the ability of us as brothers, as members of the craft, to be able to articulate not just who we are, why we joined, what it means to us, but to ask the questions. I mean, I think that if we're open at front with if we're honest with ourselves, we can, we can answer the questions of, am I really just curious? But I think you're right. A lot of times I joined and I learned something along the way that I didn't anticipate, and it's grown into something else that I think is fantastic. And most of us have those kinds of stories. I think the investigation should be working towards training the brethren on the kinds of questions to ask, how to interpret the answers, like you were saying. This particular program right here, I think, is designed, it assumes that there's a certain amount of open discussion, honesty. And sometimes people come to the craft for the wrong reasons. I think that this is designed to sort of educate them on what we're not, and get them to know a little bit about who we are as brethren. Like I say, it's not designed to replace the investigation, something else entirely. But there's always going to be someone who comes and conceals their true desire for wanting to join, and then we lose them after the second degree. There's not much we can do about that, and probably not an investigation would uncover that either. But here we're simply trying to get someone's motivations for joining. Try to explain to them a little bit more about our history, our background, and then leave it for the investigation to ask the harder questions. But I guess that's a separate discussion. But I do think that's a great point of emphasis there.
Yes, thank you. Any other questions, comments? I am going to take back the screen share. All right. Thank you, Worship Brother Joe, for your presentation and the membership committee. It was a great presentation. Thank you. Again, just a quick splash of the upcoming calendar. If you guys have suggestions coming out of this conversation for other topics, the link is on the Grand Lodge website. It's also here on the WebEx or the Zoom meeting. And again, please be sure to submit that poll before you leave. And I am going to stop the recording now.